Most people think an EMP just turns the lights off, maybe knocks out the TV, kills the Wi-Fi for a few hours. That's not the real danger. The real danger is what stops working all at once, and more importantly, the order it happens in. Because here's what nobody tells you. An EMP doesn't destroy civilization in a single moment. It collapses it, layer by layer, like a building whose foundation disappears floor by floor. And by the time most people realize how serious it is, it's already too late to do anything about it. So what we're going to do is walk through exactly what fails, when it fails, and what the world looks like in the hours, days, and weeks after a major electromagnetic pulse. No Hollywood nonsense, no zombie apocalypse fantasy stuff, just the realistic, science-based breakdown that the mainstream news would never cover because it's too uncomfortable. Let's get into it. Before we talk about what stops working, you need to understand what an EMP is, because most explanations get it wrong. An electromagnetic pulse is a burst of electromagnetic energy that can be triggered by three things. Number one, a nuclear detonation at high altitude. This is the big one. A single nuclear warhead detonated 200 to 300 miles above the center of the United States could bathe the entire continental U.S. in an EMP field. The U.S. government's own EMP commission has confirmed this. No impact crater, no mushroom cloud anyone sees, just a pulse, and then silence. Number two, a naturally occurring solar event called a coronal mass ejection, or CME. The Carrington event of 1859 is the most famous example. Telegraph systems across the U.S. and Europe caught fire. Operators received shocks. Some machines kept sending signals even after being unplugged. That same event today would be catastrophic, and scientists say we're overdue for another one. Number three, specialized EMP weapons, non-nuclear devices capable of targeting specific areas or systems. These already exist. They're just smaller in scale. Now here's the key thing to understand. An EMP doesn't fry everything like a movie. What it does is induce a massive, uncontrolled electrical surge through any conductor, wires, circuit boards, antenna systems. Modern electronics are built to run on tiny, precise voltages. An EMP hits them with thousands of times more energy than they were designed for. The result? The same thing that happens to a circuit board when you pour water on it, except faster and at a scale that covers entire continents. The first question everyone asks, would my car still work? The honest answer is, it depends. And the honest follow-up is, it probably doesn't matter. Vehicles manufactured before the mid-1980s have very little electronic infrastructure. Carburetor engines, manual ignition systems, minimal circuit boards. Many of those would survive, or at least be repairable. Modern vehicles are a different story. The average new car has over 100 electronic control units, computers that manage the engine, transmission, brakes, fuel injection, and safety systems. These are vulnerable. Studies conducted for the EMP Commission found that some test vehicles stalled and would not restart. Others experienced permanent failure of critical systems. But here's the part people miss. And this is where the real danger is. Even if your car works, the system around your car probably doesn't. Traffic lights go dark instantly. Gas pumps are electronically controlled. They stop. Navigation systems fail. Cell service is gone, so no Google Maps. And here's the scenario that keeps engineers up at night. If enough vehicles stall simultaneously on major highways, and even a fraction do, those roads become impassable. Not for hours, potentially for weeks. Because you can't tow thousands of cars at once. You can't clear a 50-mile traffic jam with no working equipment. Emergency vehicles can't move. Supply trucks can't move. Evacuation becomes physically impossible in urban areas. An EMP doesn't need to destroy every vehicle. It just needs to create enough chaos to paralyze movement entirely. And movement is the lifeblood of modern civilization. Think about what we actually use communication for today. It's not just texting your friends. It's coordination. It's how hospitals communicate with each other. It's how utilities know where faults are in the grid. It's how governments issue emergency alerts. It's how supply chains know where to send what. Within minutes of the pulse, people reach for their phones. No signal. Some towers may flicker on briefly using backup power, but that doesn't last. And it doesn't matter much because the internet backbone, the fiber optic networks, the data centers, the routing infrastructure, all of it runs on electronics too. Lose that, and you don't just lose convenience, you lose the nervous system of modern society. And here's what makes it worse. The psychological effect of communication loss is almost as dangerous as the physical effect. When people can't get information, they assume the worst. When they can't reach family members, they panic. When they don't know if help is coming, they act in their own self-interest, fast and often badly. Communication isn't just how we talk to each other. It's how we stay rational, coordinated, and calm under pressure. Remove it, and the chaos accelerates independently of any physical damage. Here's where most people's mental model completely breaks down. Most people think food is the first crisis after a grid collapse. It's not. It's water. Every major city in America relies on electrically powered pump stations to move water through the system. Treatment plants use electricity to filter, chlorinate, and pressurize the water supply. Without power, water pressure begins dropping within hours. Treatment processes slow and stop. Within 24 to 72 hours, most municipal water systems either run dry or become unsafe to drink. Sewage systems, which also rely on electric pump stations, begin backing up. Here's the brutal math. The human body can survive roughly 3 weeks without food. It can survive only 3 days without water. And with contaminated water, illness spreads faster than any panic. Most American households have less than 72 hours of water stored. Many have none. This is the silent killer in an EMP scenario, not the pulse itself, the thirst that follows. And what makes it worse, water treatment requires chemicals that are continuously restocked. You can't just turn the pumps back on after a week. The system has to be rebuilt, resupplied, and restarted from scratch. Now we get to food. The modern grocery store is not a warehouse. It's a distribution node. Most stores carry 3 to 5 days of inventory because they're designed to be restocked continuously by trucks making daily deliveries. Those trucks run on fuel pumped by electronic pumps at stations that no longer work. Their routes are coordinated by logistics software running on servers that just went dark. So, deliveries stop. Within hours of an EMP, word spreads, whatever word can spread, that something serious has happened. Panic buying begins. People who have food clear the shelves fast. People who arrive late find nothing. Refrigeration fails. Fresh food spoils quickly. The only food that survives long-term is shelf-stable. Canned goods, dried grains, freeze-dried supplies. Here's what most people don't consider. In a true long-term grid failure, agriculture itself stops. Modern farming is almost entirely mechanized and chemically dependent. Tractors run on fuel. Irrigation runs on electricity. Pesticides and fertilizers are transported by truck. A true long-term EMP scenario isn't just a supply interruption. It's a potential return to pre-industrial food production in a country that no longer has the knowledge, tools, or population distribution to support it. Hospitals have generators, that's true, but generators have fuel tanks. Fuel tanks run out. And when the trucks that resupply fuel can't move, those backup systems become countdown timers. The average hospital generator has 72 to 96 hours of fuel on hand. After that, without resupply, every ICU, every operating room, every life support machine goes dark. But the deeper problem starts long before that. Within hours of an EMP, emergency services are overwhelmed. Not just from injuries, but from millions of people simultaneously experiencing fear, medical crises, and exposure. The 911 system itself, if it functions at all, is flooded instantly. People on dialysis, people on insulin that requires refrigeration, people on ventilators, people in the... Here's the thing, none of this is inevitable on an individual level. The difference between survival and catastrophe in an EMP scenario is almost entirely determined before the event, not after. Prepared people aren't people with bunkers and machine guns. They're people who made a series of boring, practical decisions over time. Water. At minimum, 1 gallon per person per day for 30 days. Water filtration devices like Berkey filters or Life Straw can extend this indefinitely from natural sources. Food, 3 to 6 months of shelf-stable calories. Rice, beans, canned goods, freeze-dried meals. Rotation-based storage so nothing expires. Communication, a hand crank or solar emergency radio, a battery-powered ham radio setup, knowing your neighbors and establishing a local communication network before anything happens. Power, small solar panel setups with battery banks. These don't need to power your whole house, just enough to charge critical devices, run a light, and keep communication going. Electronics protection, a Faraday cage, which can be as simple as a metal trash can lined with cardboard, can protect critical small electronics from EMP damage. Medical, a 90-day supply of any critical medications, a basic trauma kit, knowledge of first aid beyond what's on your phone. None of this is extreme, all of it is logical. The people who suffer most in any infrastructure collapse aren't the unprepared. It's the people who had every opportunity to prepare and chose not to think about it. The terrifying thing about an EMP isn't the moment of the pulse, it's the chain reaction. One system failing, triggering the next, until the infrastructure most people don't even know exists is simply gone. And the hardest part is this: most people won't understand how dependent they are on these invisible systems until the systems are no longer there. If you found this video valuable, subscribe. We cover realistic preparedness, infrastructure vulnerabilities, and practical breakdowns without the Hollywood nonsense. And drop a comment. Thanks for watching, and check out this next video.